chosen one. Why are your enemies suddenly going silent? Why are the people who mocked you, who laughed at your pain, who swore you'd never rise, why are they now avoiding your eyes? Why do they cross the street when they see you coming? Why do conversations stop the moment you enter the room? And here's the question that should shake you to your core. What do they know that you haven't realized yet? Listen to me carefully. Something is happening right now, this very second, in the unseen realm. Something so massive, so undeniable, that even those who plotted against you can feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. They don't have the language for it. They can't explain the dread crawling up their spine at 3 a.m. But their spirit knows. Oh, their spirit knows. They sense the judge has entered the courtroom. Picture this. A courtroom where silence is so thick it suffocates. No gavel has struck yet. No voice has spoken. But every guilty person in that room feels their chest tighten because they know the verdict is coming. That's where your enemies are standing right now, frozen, trembling, waiting for the thunder they cannot stop. What you've been feeling lately, that heaviness in the atmosphere, that electricity before a storm breaks, that's not anxiety, beloved. That's not your mind playing tricks. That is the pressure of heaven's intervention building, mounting, preparing to split the sky wide open. And when it does, when God moves, your enemies won't just lose, they'll be undone. Before we go deeper, I want to pause and honor every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just giving, you're sowing seeds into a harvest that will feed hungry souls across this nation. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message is already stirring your spirit, go ahead and plant that seed of faith. Now hear me clearly. What God is doing right now doesn't need your permission. It doesn't need your understanding. It doesn't even need your belief. It's already in motion. The gears of divine justice are turning, and the sound is so loud in the spirit realm that demons are scrambling, and your adversaries, those who swore you'd never see vindication, are waking up drenched in cold sweat, knowing their time is up. If you felt this shift, if something in your spirit is confirming these words right now, don't just sit there. Comment, "I know," below. Declare it. Let heaven take notice. Let the enemy hear your voice rising. Because what's coming next isn't just justice. It's obliteration wrapped in mercy. And you, chosen one, are about to witness it. Why does 3 a.m. feel like the loneliest hour on earth? Why does your bedroom feel like a courtroom at that hour, where every regret, every unanswered prayer, every silent phone that never rings becomes evidence that maybe, just maybe, you've been forgotten? And here's the question that cuts deepest. If God really sees you, why does it feel like He's looking the other way? Listen to me, beloved. I know that feeling. I know what it's like to lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if your children even think about you anymore. Wondering if the church you served for 40 years remembers your name now that you can't volunteer like you used to. Wondering if God Himself has moved on to younger, stronger, more useful vessels. You gave everything. You raised those kids. You tithed when the bank account was crying. You showed up every Sunday, every prayer meeting, every potluck, even when your knees were screaming and your heart was breaking. And now the phone doesn't ring. The pew you sat in for decades has someone else's name on it, and the bills keep coming while the social security check keeps shrinking. You're not imagining the weight. It's real. The loneliness is real. The fear that time is running out, that's real too. Maybe you've stood at the kitchen sink, hands trembling, wondering how you're going to choose between medication and groceries this month. Maybe you've driven past your daughter's house, knowing she's home, knowing the grandkids are inside, but the visit never gets scheduled. Maybe you've sat in that doctor's waiting room, clutching test results, with nobody's hand to hold. And through it all, you've prayed. Dear God, how you've prayed. But the prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling, don't they? Like heaven's phone line went dead, like you've been placed on hold and forgotten. Why has it felt like your prayers hit the ceiling? Why does it feel like time is running out? Because the enemy has been lying to you. He's been whispering that you've been benched, that your season is over, that God's finished writing your story. He's convinced you that silence means abandonment, that delay means denial, that your age equals your irrelevance. But what if I told you that every unanswered prayer has been stockpiling in heaven's vault? What if every tear you cried at 3 a.m. was collected in bottles with your name on them? What if the silence wasn't God ignoring you? It was God preparing something so massive that if he'd released it any earlier, it would have crushed you. Psalm 126:5 doesn't stutter. Those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. Not might reap, not could reap, will reap. That's not a suggestion. That's a guarantee stamped by the Almighty himself. You think your enemies, the ones who mocked your faith, the ones who abandoned you when you got old, the ones who wrote you off as irrelevant, you think they're sleeping peacefully. They're not. Something's shifting. They feel it. They can't name it, but their spirit knows that the judge has entered the building, and the scales they rigged in their favor are about to be flipped. Every closed door that hurt you, that was God protecting you from tables you weren't meant to sit at. Every person who walked away, that was God removing them before they could contaminate what he's about to release. Every financial struggle that humbled you, that was heaven teaching you to depend on the only source that never runs dry. Job lost everything. Everything. His children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. His own wife told him to curse God and die. But Job 42:10 records the reversal. The Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Twice as much. Not the same. Not barely enough. Twice. That's what terrifies your enemies right now. Not that you're going to get back what they took, but that you're about to receive double for your trouble, and they're going to have front row seats to watch God do it. The sleepless nights, they're ending. The loneliness, it's being shattered. The financial pressure, it's about to break, but not on you, on them. Because what God is setting up now is about to terrify every enemy that mocked you, every voice that said you were finished, every system that tried to erase you. You're not forgotten, you're not benched, you're not too old. You're a loaded weapon that heaven has been saving for the final act. If this is your story, if you felt every word of this in your bones, don't just sit there. Type, "This is me" below. Let your voice rise. Let heaven take notice, because you are not alone, and what's coming next will prove it. But here's what you need to understand about the enemy's panic right now. You want to know what terrifies your enemies most? It's not your strength. It's not your words. It's the silence they can't explain. For years, they watched you lose. They saw the doors slam. They witnessed the delays, the heartbreaks, the nights you cried yourself to sleep, wondering if God had forgotten your address. They celebrated your setbacks like personal victories, and in their arrogance, they believed your silence meant defeat. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They mistook preparation for punishment. Chosen one, let me show you something that will split your understanding wide open. Picture an archer standing on a battlefield. He pulls back his bow not forward, but backward. The arrow doesn't fly yet. It strains against the tension. From the outside, it looks like the arrow is retreating, moving in the wrong direction, losing ground. But anyone who understands warfare knows the truth. The further back that arrow is pulled, the more devastating its release. That's you. That's been you this entire time. Every year you spent in silence, that was God's hand pulling back. Every loss that made no sense, that was the bow bending. Every delay that broke your heart, that was heaven building pressure for a launch so explosive your enemies won't have time to blink before impact. You thought you were going backward. You were being loaded. Now look at Joseph. Genesis 37-41. 17 years old with dreams from God, visions of greatness, of leadership, of a future so bright it enraged his own brothers. But what happened next? Betrayed, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, forgotten in prison for years. If you were watching Joseph's life from the outside, you'd think God had abandoned him. Silence, loss, injustice, 13 years of backwards momentum. But Genesis 41:14 says this: "Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon." Quickly. One moment he's rotting in chains. The next moment he's standing before the most powerful man in the world, interpreting dreams, reshaping nations. Joseph didn't just get promoted. He was catapulted from prison to prime minister in a single day. 13 years of pullback. One day of explosive release. That's the rhythm of God's strategy. And if you've been in the pullback season, you need to understand something that will wreck every doubt you've been carrying. The longer the silence, the louder the launch. Moses knew this rhythm too. Acts 7:23 tells us that at 40 years old, Moses tried to deliver Israel in his own strength. He killed an Egyptian. He acted out of zeal without divine timing. And what did God do? He sent Moses into the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years of herding sheep. 40 years of obscurity. 40 years of silence so deafening that Moses probably thought his calling had died in the desert sand. But Exodus 3 records the moment everything shifted. Moses is 80 years old, 80, when he sees the burning bush. When God says, "Now you're ready. Now you understand dependence. Now you know that this mission isn't about your strength, it's about my glory." And for the next 40 years, Moses became the deliverer of nations, the lawgiver, the man who spoke with God face to face. 40 years of pullback. 40 years of explosive release. Do you see it now? Do you feel the pattern clicking into place? But let me show you the one that should make you weep with hope. Luke 2:36-38. Anna the prophetess, widowed after only 7 years of marriage. And then what? 84 years in the temple. 84 years of fasting, praying, waiting. Decades of watching younger people get their breakthroughs while she stayed faithful in the shadows. If anyone had the right to feel forgotten, it was Anna. But when Mary and Joseph brought the infant Jesus to the temple, guess who was there? Anna. Not the high priest, not the scholars, not the ones who looked important. Anna, the 84-year-old widow, who'd been pulled back for nearly a century, was chosen to be among the first to proclaim the Messiah to Jerusalem. Her silence wasn't abandonment, it was appointment. And here's what you need to burn into your spirit right now. God doesn't waste your waiting. He weaponizes it. Every year you thought was stolen, it was sharpening. Every season you felt overlooked, you were being positioned. Every moment you spent in silence while your enemies mocked, that was God's finger on the bowstring, pulling back, building tension, preparing for the kind of release that doesn't just win, it dominates. Your enemies thought your silence meant you were done. They have no idea that silence in God's hands is the sound before the roar. They celebrated too early. They mocked too loudly. And now, as the bow reaches its full tension, they're starting to feel something they can't name, a trembling in their spirit, a dread in their sleep, a knowing that the arrow they thought was retreating is about to fly straight through every wall they built against you. So let me ask you this, and answer it honestly in your heart. What if the worst season of your life wasn't the end of your story, but the loading of your greatest chapter? What if every tear you cried was lubricating the bow? What if every night of silence was God refusing to release you prematurely? What if your enemies are terrified right now because they sense something they cannot stop? Because, beloved, the pullback is ending, the tension has reached its peak. And when God finally releases what He's been preparing in the secret place, your life won't just change. It will explode into purpose so undeniable that even those who swore you'd never rise will have no choice but to watch in silence as you soar. But here's what you need to understand about what happens next, because the release isn't just about you. It's about every soul who's been watching, waiting, wondering if God still moves. And what He's about to do through you will send a message so loud that your enemies won't just see your vindication. They'll feel heaven's signature on it. Chosen one, let me ask you something that's going to cut straight to the bone. Do you remember their laughter? Do you remember the way they threw their heads back when you fell? The way they whispered your name like it was a punchline? The way they celebrated your collapse as if it were their personal victory? Do you remember how they gathered in corners, weaving stories about you, twisting your pain into entertainment, spreading lies like wildfire across dry grass? They thought they were untouchable. They thought their words would vanish into the wind, leaving no trace, no record, no consequence. They mocked you when you were down. They slandered you when you were silent. They built entire careers on your suffering, entire reputations on your ruins. But here's what they didn't understand. Heaven was recording every word. In that courtroom of divine justice, their gossip became evidence. Their whispers became testimonies. Their laughter became confessions, signed in their own handwriting. Every word they spoke against you, every lie they manufactured, every reputation they tried to destroy, it's all there, filed, stamped, catalogued. And now, beloved, now those words are circling back like boomerangs aimed directly at their throats. Picture this: a courtroom where the accused thought they were spectators. They walked in confident, smirking, certain the trial was about someone else. Then the prosecutor stands and begins reading transcripts, their own words, their own messages, their own conspiracies laid bare under fluorescent lights. Watch how quickly arrogance crumbles into trembling. Watch how fast pride turns into pleading. That's what's happening right now in the spiritual realm. Your enemies are standing before the judge, and they're hearing their own voices played back. They thought they silenced you, but silence is borrowed time, and time just ran out. Let me take you deeper. Their power was never real. It was paper dressed up as stone. It was cardboard, painted to look like steel. It was illusion propped up by intimidation, smoke and mirrors held together by complicity and fear. But you, chosen one, your foundation is stone, your scars are granite. Every wound you survived carved something permanent into your spirit that no fire can burn, no flood can wash away, no enemy can erase. They built paper castles and called themselves kings. You bled on stone and became unbreakable. Think about Haman in the book of Esther. This man built a gallows 75 feet high, 75 feet, specifically designed to hang Mordecai, the man he despised. He measured the wood, he drove the nails, he stood back and admired his own cruelty. But Esther 7:10 tells us what happened next. So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The very weapon he built became his own execution. The trap he set snapped shut on his own neck. Your enemies built gallows too. They constructed lies designed to destroy you. They sharpened weapons meant to pierce your reputation. They dug pits and covered them with leaves, certain you'd stumble into darkness. But what they don't know yet, what they're about to discover, is that every trap they set has their name on it now. Every weapon they forged is being turned back toward them. Divine justice doesn't just defend you, it uses their own schemes to dismantle them. Consider Goliath. For 40 days this giant mocked Israel. Twice a day, morning and evening, he stood in that valley and hurled insults at God's people. His voice boomed, his armor gleamed. His confidence was absolute. He saw David, a teenage shepherd with a sling, and laughed. 1 Samuel 17:44. Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. But what happened? David didn't need a sword. He didn't need armor. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a brook, and one of them buried itself so deep in Goliath's skull that the giant fell face first into the dirt. The mocking stopped mid-sentence, the laughter choked, and David used Goliath's own sword to cut off his head. Your enemies are Goliath. Their mocking is about to stop mid-sentence. The very confidence they wore like armor is about to become the weight that drags them down. And you won't even need to lift a finger. God is picking up the stone right now. Then there's Daniel. His enemies were so jealous, so consumed with hatred, that they manipulated the king into signing a law designed to trap him. They knew Daniel prayed 3 times a day. They knew his faithfulness was unshakable, so they made prayer illegal, sealed it with royal decree, and waited for Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. They probably celebrated that night, toasting each other, certain the prophet was finished. But Daniel 6:24 records what happened next. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. The same pit they dug for Daniel became their grave. The same lions they used as weapons tore them apart before their feet touched the ground. That's the pattern, chosen one. That's how divine justice operates. The weapon always returns to the hand that threw it. So let me ask you directly, are you ready to see God terrify your enemies? Are you ready to watch the gallows built for you swing back toward those who constructed it? Are you ready to witness the pit meant for your destruction swallow the ones who dug it? Then declare it right now. Don't whisper it. Don't think it quietly. Type it in the comments so heaven hears you and hell trembles. My God fights for me, because he does. And when God fights, enemies don't just lose, they collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. Their paper castles are burning. Your stone foundation stands. And what's about to happen next will leave no doubt in anyone's mind that you were never alone, never forgotten, never abandoned. But before we move forward, you need to understand something even deeper, something about the evidence that's been building against them while you thought nothing was happening. Chosen one, let me ask you something that's going to cut straight to the bone. How long have you been waiting? How many years have you sat in that same chair, staring at the same walls, whispering the same prayers into what felt like empty air? How many nights did you fall asleep, wondering if God had put your file at the bottom of the pile and simply forgotten to call your name? You've watched others get their breakthrough. You've seen people half as faithful get twice the blessing. You've stood at gravesides, bankruptcy hearings, and hospital rooms asking the question that burned hotter than any other: God, where are you? And here's what broke you more than the waiting itself. It was the silence, the deafening, suffocating silence that made you wonder if you'd imagined the whole calling in the first place. But listen to me right now, and let this settle into the deepest part of your spirit. Silence is not absence. Silence is strategy. For years you thought nothing was moving. You thought your enemies had won. You thought the people who mocked your faith, who laughed at your prayers, who celebrated your struggles, you thought they were untouchable. But what you didn't see was this. While you waited in the dark, God was building something in the unseen realm so massive, so devastating to the kingdom of darkness, that when it finally breaks through, and beloved, it's breaking through right now, the shockwave will level everything standing against you. Think about Paul and Silas in that Philippian prison. Acts 16 tells us they were beaten, bleeding, feet locked in stocks, thrown into the innermost cell where light couldn't reach. Midnight came. No rescue, no angel appearance, no divine intervention. Just darkness, pain, and chains. But at midnight, at the darkest, most hopeless hour, they began to sing. And suddenly, the Bible says, there was a great earthquake, not a gentle tremor. A violent shaking that ripped the foundations apart, snapped every chain, and threw open every prison door. The jailer woke up, saw what happened, and fell on his knees because he knew this wasn't natural. This was the power of a God who waits until midnight to prove that darkness has no authority over his chosen ones. You've been in your midnight hour, haven't you? The deepest part of the night where hope feels like a memory and faith feels like foolishness. But here's what your enemies don't understand. Midnight is not your ending. Midnight is God's setup. Because when God moves after long silence, he doesn't just answer prayer, he obliterates every structure built against you. Look at the Red Sea. For 400 years, Israel cried out in Egypt. 400 years of slavery, suffering, systematic oppression. Then Moses shows up, 10 plagues fall, and Pharaoh finally releases them. They're walking toward freedom, when suddenly the Egyptian army appears behind them. Chariots, soldiers, weapons, death closing in fast. And in front of them, water. Deep, impassable, unmoving water. They're trapped, cornered. One more step and they drown. One step back and they're slaughtered. This is the moment when everything looks finished. But watch what happens. Exodus 14:21. Moses stretches out his hand, and God doesn't part the sea slowly. He sends a wind so fierce, so violent, that the water splits like torn fabric. Walls of ocean stand frozen on both sides while his people walk through on dry ground. And when their enemies try to follow, the walls collapse, and Egypt's finest army drowns in seconds. Your enemies thought they had you cornered. They thought the walls were closing in. They thought this was your end. They were wrong. What you're feeling right now, that pressure building in your chest, that sense that something massive is about to snap, that's the sound of spiritual walls getting ready to part. That's the roar of divine wind preparing to split obstacles that looked permanent. That's the rumble before the earthquake that will shatter every chain your enemies thought would hold you forever. And here's what terrifies them most. They can feel it too. They don't have the language for it. They can't explain why your name keeps them awake at night. They can't understand why their confidence is crumbling, why their plans suddenly feel shaky, why every move they make against you now backfires. But their spirit knows. The ground beneath them is shifting, and they cannot stop what's coming. Jesus spent 3 days in a tomb. 3 days of silence. 3 days where his enemies celebrated, where Rome thought they'd won, where darkness declared victory. But on the third day death couldn't hold him. The stone rolled away, not because men moved it, but because resurrection power exploded from within. And when he walked out, Rome trembled. Hell screamed. And every enemy who thought they'd buried the Son of God realized they'd just awakened the judge of all the earth. Your 3 days are ending. Your midnight is about to break into morning. And what's rising in your life isn't just blessing, it's the kind of divine vindication that makes your enemies wish they'd never known your name. But here's the truth that's going to shock you. They don't fear you because you're strong. They fear you because what you carry is unstoppable. The anointing on your life, the calling in your bloodline, the assignment written in heaven before you were born, it's awakening. And when it fully activates, when God says, "Now," nothing they built against you will remain standing. So I'm asking you one final question before we move forward. Are you ready to stop being the prisoner and become the earthquake? Beloved, can we just stop for a moment? Can we breathe together? You've been carrying this weight for so long, 70 years, 80 years, maybe more. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that fighting was all you had left, that the battle was your identity, that rest was a luxury you couldn't afford. But hear me now, chosen one. You don't have to fight forever. The psalmist knew this ache when he wrote in Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." Not keep fighting, not keep striving. Be still. Because there comes a sacred moment when your only assignment is to rest in what God has already accomplished. The storm you've been standing in, it has broken. The thunder has passed. The enemies who circled you like wolves have scattered into the shadows. And what remains now is not emptiness. What remains is sacred silence. The kind of silence that doesn't frighten you anymore. The kind that wraps around you like a warm blanket on a cold January night in Brooklyn. You survived, dear one. You survived what was designed to obliterate you. And I know you're tired. I know your bones ache with memories. I know you wake up some mornings wondering if you have anything left to give. But let me tell you what God sees when he looks at you right now. He doesn't see defeat. He doesn't see weariness. He sees someone who stood when the world said fall. He sees a warrior who refused to bow. He sees royalty that was refined in the furnace. What was meant to crush you has crowned you. Think about Joseph, sold into slavery at 17, falsely accused, thrown into prison, forgotten for years. But Genesis 41:41 records the moment everything shifted. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt, from the pit to the palace, from the prisoner to the prime minister." The very weapon formed against him became the scepter placed in his hand. That's your story now. The attacks weren't random. They were the forge. The betrayals weren't abandonment. They were the fire that burned away everything false until only the real you remained. And what remains, beloved, is pure gold. So right now, wherever you are, I want you to do something that might feel strange. Close your eyes for just a second. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it beating. That rhythm is not just biology. That is the sound of victory. Every beat is a declaration that you outlasted the storm. And if you can receive this truth, if something deep in your spirit is exhaling for the first time in years, whisper it out loud. The silence is sacred. Say it again. Let your voice crack if it needs to. Let the tears come if they must. Because this isn't the silence of being forgotten. This is the silence of having already won. But beloved, there's something you need to understand about this rest you're entering. It's not passive, it's powerful. Because when God crowns someone who has walked through what you've walked through, that crown carries authority. And what God is about to do with that authority, your enemy don't just fear it, they're about to witness it. You thought it ended there, didn't you? You thought the story was simple. God rises, enemies fall, justice served, roll credits. But chosen one, what God is unfolding right now goes deeper than courtroom victories and public vindication. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. While your enemies tremble on the outside, there's another battle raging. A battle they can't see. A battle that's been tearing you apart in the quiet hours when nobody's watching. The battle within. Think about it. Your enemies feared the storm coming for them. But what about the storm that's been battering your own soul? The doubt that whispers at 2 a.m. The fear that maybe you imagined God's promises. The despair that creeps in when the breakthrough takes longer than you expected. That voice that says, maybe I'm not chosen. Maybe I'm just crazy. That's the real war, beloved. And your enemies? They're counting on that internal storm to destroy you before God's justice ever arrives. Let me ask you something that's going to cut deep. What good is it if your enemies fall but you're still bound? What victory is it if they lose their power but you lose your peace? What justice is served if their lies are exposed but your faith is shattered? The Apostle Paul understood this. In Ephesians 6:12, he didn't say we wrestle against people. He said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. Your real enemy isn't the person who slandered you. It's the spirit of defeat they planted in your mind. And that spirit has been working overtime, hasn't it? Every time you almost believed God was moving, doubt showed up. Every time you started to rise, fear knocked you back down. Every time you reached for your calling, shame reminded you of your past. But here's what's happening right now that your enemies fear most. It's not just that God is exposing them. It's that God is igniting something inside you that no external victory could ever match. A holy fire. The kind that burns away doubt. The kind that incinerates fear. The kind that turns despair into declarations. Your enemies can survive your success, but they cannot survive your awakening. Think about David before he faced Goliath. The giant wasn't his biggest battle. His biggest battle was convincing himself that a shepherd boy could take down a trained warrior. The real victory happened in David's heart before it ever happened on the battlefield. That's where you are right now. God isn't just preparing to destroy your enemies. He's preparing to destroy the enemies within you. The lies you believed, the limitations you accepted, the smallness you wore like chains. And when that fire finishes its work inside you, when every doubt has been burned away and every fear has turned to ash, you won't just walk differently, you'll breathe differently. You'll speak with an authority that makes demons flee and makes your enemies wish they'd never known your name. So here's the question that should haunt you in the best possible way. What if the battle your enemies fear most isn't the courtroom, isn't the exposure, isn't even the judgment, but the fire God is awakening inside of you right now? Because once that fire is lit, beloved, nothing will ever be the same. Not for them, and especially not for you. But chosen one, let me tell you about the enemy you haven't named yet. The one that doesn't knock on your door at midnight. The one that doesn't send threatening letters or hire lawyers. This enemy lives closer than your own shadow. It whispers in your mirror every morning. It sits beside you when the house gets too quiet. This enemy is you, not the real you, not the you that God sees, but the you that doubt has been building brick by brick, year by year, until it stands between you and your destiny like a wall you can't seem to climb. You've buried too many friends, haven't you? You've watched the funerals multiply while the phone calls dwindle. You've sat at tables that used to overflow with laughter, now silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. And in those moments, those long, heavy moments when the clock ticks too loud and the memories press too hard, you've asked the question you're almost afraid to speak out loud. God, am I still useful? Does my life still matter? Or am I just taking up space waiting for my turn to go home? Listen to me carefully. That question didn't come from heaven. That thought didn't originate in the throne room of God. That whisper came from the pit, designed specifically to neutralize you before your enemies even have to lift a finger. Because here's what hell knows that you've forgotten. You are more dangerous now than you've ever been in your entire life. Think about a clock tower standing in the center of an old city. 70, 80, maybe 100 years it's been there. Once upon a time, the whole town set their lives by its chimes. Farmers knew when to come in from the fields. Mothers knew when to call their children home. Merchants knew when to close their shops. That tower was the heartbeat of the community. But then the gears started to rust. The oil dried up, the hands froze, and slowly, people stopped looking up. They bought their own watches. They set their own schedules. And the tower, that magnificent tower that once commanded the skyline, became just another relic. Beautiful from a distance, but useless up close. Until one day, someone climbs those stairs. Someone who remembers what that tower was built for. And they bring oil, fresh oil, sacred oil, and they pour it over those rusted gears. At first, nothing happens. The metal groans. The resistance is almost too much. But then suddenly something catches. One gear turns, then another, and another. And before anyone in the city can prepare themselves, the bell rings. Not a weak ring, not a tentative sound. A roar that shakes windows 3 blocks away. A declaration that echoes off every building, every street corner, every heart that had forgotten what it sounded like. The tower isn't finished. The tower was just waiting for the oil. Chosen one, you are that tower. Time hasn't ended you. Time has seasoned you. The rust you feel isn't decay. It's the enemy's desperate attempt to lock up what God is about to activate. Because when you ring again, when your voice lifts, when your prayers rise, when your purpose reignites, this entire generation will hear it. Turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 19. The prophet Elijah, the same man who called down fire from heaven, who shut up the sky for 3 years, who slaughtered 450 false prophets in a single day, this giant of faith is sitting under a broom tree in the wilderness, begging God to let him die. "I have had enough, Lord," he says. "Take my life." This is Elijah, the prophet, the chosen one, and he's ready to quit. Does that sound familiar? Have you been there? Have you sat in your own wilderness, under your own broom tree, whispering the same prayer? "God, I'm tired. I'm done. Just let me come home." But watch what God does. He doesn't rebuke Elijah. He doesn't shame him. He doesn't give him a pep talk about pulling himself together. God feeds him. God lets him rest. And then, only then, God gives him his next assignment. Go back the way you came, the Lord says. Anoint kings. Raise up a successor. Your work isn't finished. Your exhaustion isn't your ending. It's my reset. Do you hear that? Your weariness is not disqualification. Your exhaustion is not evidence that God is done with you. It's proof that you've been fighting battles most people run from. And now heaven is saying, rest, receive, and then rise. Because there's still oil in your lamp, and this world is drowning in darkness. The enemy wants you to believe that because your body moves slower, your purpose has stopped. That because your friends are gone, your calling went with them. That because the world celebrates youth, your years have made you irrelevant. That is a lie. Your enemies aren't terrified of your strength. They're terrified of your endurance. They're not afraid of your speed. They're afraid of your stubborn refusal to quit. They don't fear your age. They fear your authority that only comes from decades of walking with God through fire and coming out still standing. You are still here. Let that truth land. After everything hell has thrown at you, the losses, the heartbreaks, the disappointments, the illnesses, the betrayals, you are still here, still breathing, still believing, still carrying the name of Jesus on your lips. Your survival alone terrifies the enemy, because he knows what's coming next. So I'm asking you right now, before we go any deeper, if this word is hitting something real in your spirit, if you've been battling that internal enemy, that voice that says you're finished, don't stay silent. Type these 3 words in the comments. I'm still here. Say it, declare it. Let heaven hear you. Let hell hear you. Let every force that tried to bury you hear your voice rising from the grave they dug. Because, chosen one, what's about to happen next will require every ounce of endurance you've built, every scar you've earned, every lesson learned in the wilderness. The internal war is ending, and the external vindication is beginning. Chosen one, stop right there. Before we go one step further, I need you to understand something that will shatter every lie you've believed about yourself for the last 70, 80, maybe 90 years. Your enemies are not terrified of who you were. They're not losing sleep over the person who struggled, who fell, who carried shame like a second skin. No. What's making them tremble in the watches of the night is who you are becoming. And beloved, you haven't even seen it yet. Close your eyes for just a moment. I want you to picture something with me. You're standing before a mirror. Not the bathroom mirror where you count wrinkles every morning. Not the reflection that reminds you of every year gravity has stolen from your face. This is different. In this mirror, you don't see age, you see authority. You don't see gray hair, you see a crown, those scars you've hidden for decades. In this reflection, they're not wounds anymore. They're glowing, radiant, like cracks in pottery filled with pure gold, and light is pouring through every single one. The Japanese have an ancient art called kintsugi. When a precious bowl breaks, they don't throw it away. They mend it with gold, making the cracks more valuable than the original piece. The pot damage doesn't diminish it. The damage defines its worth. That's you, chosen one. Every place you've been broken, every betrayal that shattered you, every loss that left you in pieces on the floor, God has been filling those cracks with glory. And now, when the light hits you, when heaven's spotlight finds you in the crowd, you don't just reflect, you radiate. But here's what your enemies see that you haven't recognized yet. They see the gold before you do. They sense the shift before you feel it. They know that when a vessel has been through the refiner's fire and didn't melt, when it's been shattered and remade with divine intention, it becomes unstoppable. And that knowledge, beloved, that foreknowledge of your emergence, it's destroying their sleep. Think about Moses, 80 years old, 80. His face so ordinary that Pharaoh's court barely noticed him. But after he encountered God, after he stood in the presence of the Almighty on that mountain, Exodus 34-29 tells us his face shone. It radiated with such intensity that people couldn't even look at him directly. He had to veil his face because the glory was too much for human eyes to bear. Moses didn't get younger. He didn't get smoother skin or fewer wrinkles. But he got glory. And glory, chosen one, makes age irrelevant. You think you're too old for God to use you. Moses was a wanted fugitive with a speech impediment at 80, and God said, "Perfect. Now you're ready to split seas and lead nations." You think your best years are archived in photograph albums. Job lost everything at the end of his life. Everything. His children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. The man sat in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery. But James 5:11 reminds us that the Lord's purpose for Job prevailed, and God didn't just restore what was taken, he doubled it. Job 42:10. The Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. Twice as much. After the suffering, after the loss, after everyone said he was finished. Your enemies looked at you and saw remnants. God looks at you and sees double portion. They see what life subtracted. Heaven sees what grace is about to multiply. But here's where this gets dangerous for them. Here's why they're panicking. You are beginning to see yourself the way God sees you. That shift, that internal revolution, when the mirror finally tells the truth, it changes everything. Because once you know you're not broken, once you understand you're crowned, once you realize you're not forgotten but engraved on the palms of his hands, there's no going back to small. Listen to these words. Let them sink past your mind into your bones. You are not broken, you are crowned. You are not weak, you are chosen. You are not forgotten, you are engraved. Say it again. Not broken, crowned, not weak, chosen, not forgotten, engraved. One more time, and this time let your spirit feel the weight of it. Not broken, crowned, not weak, chosen, not forgotten, engraved. Isaiah 49:16 declares, "See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands." Engraved, not written in pencil, not typed in a file that can be deleted. Engraved, carved so deep into his flesh that every time he opens his hands to bless, every time he reaches to heal, every time he moves on behalf of his children, he sees your name. Do you understand what that means? You are not an afterthought. You are not a backup plan. You are not the candidate God settled for because nobody better showed up. You are engraved into the very hands that flung stars into space. Now whisper this. Don't just think it. Don't just read it. Speak it into the atmosphere until the walls hear you, until your own ears believe you, until hell itself backs away from the sound of your voice. I am the evidence. Say it again. I am the evidence. Your survival is the evidence that God keeps his promises. Your endurance is the evidence that his strength is made perfect in weakness. Your very existence still here, still breathing, still believing after everything that tried to bury you, is the evidence that no weapon formed against you can prosper. You are not testimony waiting to happen. You are the testimony, walking, breathing, standing. And your enemies? They see it, they feel it. They know that when God finishes what he started in you, when the gold in your cracks catches the light, when the crown on your head becomes visible to human eyes, their reign of mockery is over. So the question burning in heaven right now, the question that will determine what happens next in your story is this. Will you finally see what they've been seeing? Will you look in the prophetic mirror and recognize the warrior staring back at you? Because once you do, everything shifts. And what God is about to release through you will make their terror look like mercy. Chosen one, let me tell you what keeps your enemies awake at 3 in the morning. It's not your words. It's not your threats. It's not even your prayers, though those shake the foundations of hell itself. What terrifies them is simpler and far more devastating. You're still here. Every morning you open your eyes, you become living proof that their schemes failed. Every step you take down that hallway, every breath filling your lungs, every moment you refuse to disappear, you are the evidence they cannot destroy. And that evidence, beloved, is being recorded in a courtroom they cannot access, filed in archives they cannot burn, testified before a judge they cannot bribe. Your very existence is the receipt heaven has been keeping. Think about what that means. In the natural world, they can shred documents, they can delete emails, they can buy silence, they can rewrite history in their favor. But there's one piece of evidence that stands untouchable: you, breathing, standing, testifying without saying a word. Every scar on your body, that's a signed affidavit. Every tear you cried in secret, that's a line item in heaven's ledger. Every sleepless night when you thought God had abandoned you, recorded, witnessed, documented with the kind of precision that would make any prosecutor weep with gratitude. Do you understand the weight of what I'm telling you? You are not just a survivor. You are walking, breathing, undeniable proof that everything they tried to bury is still alive. Picture this with me. Imagine archaeologists digging through the ruins of a once mighty empire. The palaces have crumbled, the armies are dust. The kings who thought they were invincible, their names barely whispers in forgotten texts. But there, in the rubble, beneath centuries of debris, they find it a stone tablet. The engraving still sharp, the words still clear, the truth still speaking. That's you, chosen one. Empires built on lies will always fall. Rulers drunk on power will always fade. But your story, your testimony, it's carved in eternity. Not in stone that crumbles, but in the book of life that outlasts galaxies. Revelation 12:11 tells us how the saints overcome. By the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Not by their strength, not by their weapons, by their testimony. By the undeniable evidence of what God brought them through. And your enemies know this. Oh, they know it. That's why they worked so hard to silence you. That's why they tried to erase you from the narrative. Because as long as you're standing, as long as you're speaking, as long as your life continues to testify, their lies have an expiration date stamped across them. Think about Paul, locked in a Roman prison, chained to guards, stripped of freedom, isolated from the churches he planted. Rome thought they'd neutralize the threat. They thought cold stone walls would contain his influence. But what happened instead? From that prison cell, Paul wrote letters that shook the ancient world and still shake ours today. Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon, words that couldn't be contained by iron or stone. Testimony that outlived the empire that imprisoned him. Your enemies put you in your own prison, didn't they? Maybe it wasn't literal chains. Maybe it was isolation, abandonment, betrayal, financial ruin, public humiliation. They thought if they could just lock you away from your purpose, your voice would fade, your influence would die. But here you are, still writing your letters, still speaking your truth, still standing as irrefutable evidence that what God starts, hell cannot stop. And here's the revelation that makes demons tremble. What terrifies your enemies most is not what you lost, it's what you survived. They're not afraid of the you that had it all together. They're terrified of the you that fell apart and let God put you back together. They're not shaken by the version of you that never faced hardship. They're undone by the version that walked through fire and came out refined, not ruined, because loss can be explained away. But survival? Survival after what they put you through? That's a testimony that cannot be cross-examined. That's evidence that stands on its own. That's proof positive that there's a power protecting you that they cannot touch. Every morning you wake up is another day their conspiracy failed. Every meal you eat is communion with a God who provides when they tried to leave you starving. Every conversation you have is a sermon they cannot silence. Every smile on your face is a verdict read aloud in heaven's court. You are the stone tablet in their ruined empire. And chosen one, tablets don't apologize for still existing. Engravings don't ask permission to tell the truth. Evidence doesn't shrink back because liars find it inconvenient. Your scars are not shame. They're scripture written on human skin. Your story is not embarrassing. It's a testimony that will outlive those who tried to end it. Your survival is not luck. It's a divine declaration that no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Not because weapons won't be formed, but because they won't succeed. So if you're still standing after everything hell threw at you, if you've survived the betrayals, the losses, the nights that tried to swallow you whole, the diagnoses that came with expiration dates, the relationships that were supposed to destroy you, I need you to do something right now. Don't just listen passively. Declare it. Type these 3 words: I survived, I testify. Let that declaration rise like incense before the throne. Let your enemies see it. Let heaven record it. Let the enemy hear your voice refusing to stay silent. Because, beloved, your testimony is about to become evidence in cases you didn't even know were being tried. Your survival is about to become the precedent that sets others free. Your scars are about to become the proof that tips the scales of justice in courtrooms across the spiritual realm. And when that happens, when your story becomes the stone tablet that future generations read, your enemies won't just be defeated, they'll be forgotten. But you'll be remembered as the one who testified, the one who survived, the one whose very existence became the evidence that changed everything. Now let me show you exactly how that evidence is being presented right now in the courts of heaven. Chosen one, stop for a moment. Just stop. Do you feel it? That tremor running through your chest right now? That's not fear. That's not doubt. That's recognition. Your spirit is waking up to something your mind hasn't caught up with yet. For years, decades maybe, you've been living like someone backstage, waiting in the shadows while others took the spotlight, watching through the curtain while the world applauded names that weren't yours. And you whispered to yourself in those dark moments, maybe I missed my cue. Maybe my scene was cut. Maybe God forgot I was even here. But what if I told you that you were never backstage by accident? What if every year you spent in obscurity was God's way of keeping you safe until the world was ready for what you carry? What if the curtain is about to be ripped open and everyone who thought you were finished is about to see you step into the brightest light you've ever known? Listen to me carefully. Your enemies aren't just trembling because they're afraid of what God might do to them. They're trembling because they finally understand what God has been doing through you all along. They thought your silence meant defeat. They thought your waiting meant you'd given up. But your silence was rehearsal. Your waiting was preparation. And now, right now, heaven is calling you to center stage. You are not just a survivor of their schemes. You are a signpost pointing an entire generation back to the power of endurance, the beauty of faithfulness, the terror of divine timing. You are prophecy in motion, beloved. Every step you take from this moment forward writes a chapter that others will read when they're tempted to quit. Think about Lazarus for a moment. Picture that scene in John chapter 11. 4 days dead, body already decaying. Everyone weeping, convinced the story was over. Even his own sisters said, "Lord, by now there's a stench." They'd given up. But Jesus stood at that tomb and called him by name. And when Lazarus walked out, still wrapped in grave clothes, still smelling like death, what happened? The Bible says many believed. But it also says the religious leaders plotted to kill both Jesus and Lazarus because their fear had turned to rage. Do you see it? Your resurrection isn't just about you getting free. It's about everyone who's been watching you, waiting to see if this God you serve is real, finally having proof they cannot deny. And your enemies, they're not just afraid of you. They're afraid of what your story does to their narrative. Because if you can rise after being buried, their power was never real to begin with. Now think about Esther, hidden in a palace, waiting for her moment. The king didn't even know her real identity. Her enemy Haman was building gallows, planning genocide, celebrating his own brilliance. But Esther had been positioned for such a time as this. When she finally stepped before the king, when the truth was unveiled, Haman didn't just lose his plot. He lost his life on the very gallows he'd built for someone else. Esther's unveiling wasn't just her victory. It was the salvation of her entire people. That's what's happening to you right now. God hasn't just been protecting you, He's been positioning you. You are standing at your for such a time as this moment, and the unveiling is not optional anymore. It's appointed, it's scheduled, it's written in the books of heaven with ink that doesn't fade. But here's what you need to understand, and this is where it gets personal. The world thought you were fading. Your own family maybe thought you were past your prime. Society looked at your age, your scars, your setbacks, and wrote you off as yesterday's news. But heaven was never confused. While the world saw you aging, God saw you maturing. While they saw you slowing down, He saw you gaining wisdom they'll never possess. While they saw you becoming irrelevant, He was rehearsing you for the main act. You were never in the background because you weren't good enough for the spotlight. You were in the background because the spotlight wasn't ready for you yet. There's a massive difference between being overlooked and being protected until your moment arrives. You weren't hidden because you were weak. You were hidden because you were being made unbreakable. And now, right now, something is shifting. Can you feel the atmosphere changing? Can you sense the curtain starting to move? That's not your imagination. That's the sound of heaven saying, it's time. Not yet. No. Now. Not hidden? No. Revealed. Not forgotten? No. Remembered. Not ordinary? No. Chosen. Your enemies can feel this shift too. That's why their anxiety is spiking. That's why they're suddenly scrambling. That's why they're trying to control narratives, manage perceptions, cover their tracks. Because they know something is about to break open that they cannot stop. The curtain is moving, and when it opens fully, the whole theater is going to see what God has been preparing in the dark. But here's your part in this unveiling, beloved. You have to step forward. God has opened the curtain, but you have to walk through it. You can't stand in the wings anymore, whispering, I'm not ready, I'm too old, I'm too broken, I'm too unknown. Those are yesterday's lies, trying to keep you from today's destiny. Lazarus had to walk out of the tomb. Esther had to approach the king. Moses had to go back to Egypt. David had to face Goliath. And you have to stop hiding behind excuses and step into the light that's been waiting for you since before you were born. If you feel this word burning in your chest right now, if something inside you is screaming, yes, this is me, this is my moment, then type Amen in the comments below. Don't just watch this happen to someone else. Declare that you are part of this unveiling. Share this video with someone who's been waiting in the shadows too long. Let them know the curtain is opening and God has not forgotten His chosen ones. Because what comes next isn't just about you stepping into your destiny. It's about everyone watching you finally understanding that God still raises the dead, still vindicates the faithful, still turns the tables on the arrogant. Your unveiling is their awakening, and it's happening right now. Chosen one, as we come to the close of this sacred moment together, I need you to hold 3 eternal truths close to your heart. First, what God is doing right now in your life is not random. It's not coincidence. It's divine strategy. Your enemies feel the shift because heaven has already moved. The verdict is written. The curtain is opening. Your vindication is not coming. It's here. Second, your waiting was never wasted. Every year you spent in obscurity was preparation. Every tear you cried in secret was collected. Every prayer you whispered when hope felt distant was heard. You were being refined, protected, and positioned for this exact moment when the world would finally see what God has been building in the shadows. Third, you are not a victim of your story. You are a signpost. Your resurrection will spark belief in others. Your unveiling will terrify the arrogant and inspire the weary. You carry something the next generation desperately needs to witness, proof that God still vindicates the faithful, still raises the buried, still remembers His chosen ones. But beloved, I need you to understand something deeper than any message I could speak. You are not walking this path alone. Even now, as you sit in your living room, your kitchen, your quiet corner of the world, the God who created the heavens is working on your behalf. He has not forgotten your name. He has not abandoned your cause, and every promise He made over your life still stands, unshaken by time, untouched by doubt. And beyond God's presence, you have a community here. Look at these comments, look at these hearts connecting across cities, across states, across the country. We are not strangers watching a screen. We are family bound by faith, united by struggle, strengthened by the same Spirit. When you feel weak, we will pray. When you feel forgotten, we will remind you. When you feel like giving up, we will stand with you until your strength returns. So let me ask you this one final question, and let it settle deep in your spirit. If God has brought you this far through every valley, every storm, every season, when you thought you couldn't take another step, why would He stop now? He wouldn't. He won't. And the proof is that you're still here, still breathing, still believing. Now, before you go, I want to pray over you. Not as a distant voice through a screen, but as someone who understands the weight you've carried. Close your eyes if you're able. Place your hand over your heart and receive these words as if I'm standing right beside you, hand on your shoulder, speaking directly into your life. Father God, Almighty Creator, Ancient of Days, I come before you now, carrying every soul who has heard this message. Lord, you see them, you know their names. You've counted every tear, recorded every prayer, witnessed every moment they almost gave up but chose to keep going. Tonight, I ask you to breathe fresh strength into their weary bones. Where they are tired, renew them. Where they are broken, heal them. Where they are confused, give them clarity. Where they are afraid, surround them with your perfect peace. God, I pray for divine vindication over their lives. Every lie spoken against them, silence it. Every scheme plotted in darkness, expose it. Every enemy who thought they'd won, let them see that you are the judge, and your verdict cannot be overturned. Open doors that no man can shut. Provide resources they haven't even thought to ask for. Send divine connections that will accelerate their purpose. Give them dreams and visions that will clarify their next steps, and remind them daily that their age is not their limitation, it is their authority. Lord, let them feel your presence right now. Let them know in their spirit that you are proud of how they've endured. Let them sense your smile, your approval, your deep and unshakable love. Bless their families. Restore what's been broken, heal what's been wounded, protect what's precious, and use their testimony to awaken others who are still sleeping in defeat. In Jesus' mighty name, the name above every name, the name that makes demons tremble and heaven respond, I seal this prayer over their lives. Let your will be done. Let your kingdom come. Let your glory be revealed. Amen. Now, chosen one, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share what God spoke to your heart today. Ask your questions, tell your story. Let this community surround you with prayer and encouragement. You don't have to face tomorrow alone. And if this message stirred something deep in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to know they haven't been forgotten. Share it with the friend who's about to give up. Share it with the family member who thinks their best days are behind them. Because your story, your unveiling, might be exactly what someone else needs to keep believing. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Every week, we're releasing messages specifically designed to remind God's chosen ones that they are seen, they are loved, and they are not finished. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Thank you for opening your heart, for trusting these words, for believing that God still moves in power. Your faithfulness to watch until the very end tells me everything I need to know about your spirit. You are ready for what's next. Walk forward in confidence, beloved. The curtain has opened, the light is shining, and you are exactly where heaven has always intended you to be. Until we meet again, remember, you are chosen, you are covered, and you are about to witness what God does when His people finally step into their unveiling. God bless you mightily. Go in peace and go in power.